This morning, we talked about Risotto 3.0, what's going to change. We talked about our data model, statically typed data model, and we went deep into the rabbit hole with EC2. So maybe let's just do a quick recap of the major things we covered this morning, because I think it's going to be useful for everyone else.
Cool. I'm already sharing my screen, so let me jump over to the doc site that we have. You will find under risotto.com. And if you install Risotto today, then you will get version 2.4, and it will connect to your cloud provider, and will get the data and will translate it into a model that is statically typed, as Lars just said. So, and let me explain you first what do I mean by statically typed, and let me show you how things have changed for the upcoming 3.0 release. So when we talk about statically typed data models, then we mean something where we make sure that if you ask for a specific resource of a specific kind, that you can expect a specific data model with specific properties of a specific kind. So, and we are just using the AWS EC2 instance as an example to talk about that. And what we see here is basically the properties that every AWS EC2 instance has. So, as you see here, there is a relationship between different kinds. So, an AWS EC2 instance is also an AWS resource. It is also an instance, which is just a compute instance in a more abstract way. And an instance is also a resource, which is the most abstract entity that we have in the system. And that's only on the how do I say best? Like it is on the level of kinds. So a EC2 instance, is a resource, and therefore has all the properties that you see here. Mm-hmm. So for example, if you look into the instance, you see something like there's a property called instance cores, and that is of type double. Same goes for instance type, which is of type string. So that's just an example that shows you, like, if I get an AWS EC2 instance, then I can expect all the properties that you see here.
Mm-hmm. So everything we see on the right, it starts with AWS account and so forth, all resources, right?
Exactly. So these are the specific resource that Risotto is able to collect in version 2.4. The list actually also has changed in 3.0 since we support more resources. But you're absolutely right. So this is actually the list of resources and the data model that is defined for every resource that we found.
Cool. So everything in this list is a resource. Specifically, since we're looking at AWS, everything is also an AWS resource, correct?
Correct. And just to give you a broader picture, there's not only AWS, there's also something like DigitalOcean, where you can basically see the same kind of approach where everything is a resource until we reach a specific, the most specific kind. We also support Google Cloud, Kubernetes, and always on the right side, you see like all the resources that can be collected and are understood by Risotto.
And Matthias, I think that's just an important concept that we look at, that Risotto looks at the world as resources. Like, to start with, everything is a resource, every individual service. And then you can start, I use the word double clicking, but then you can start peeling the onion, right? You see underneath, like, okay, like what exactly is it? Is it an AWS resource? Is it a GCP resource? And then very specifically for every cloud, we have the service name. And in this case, like, you're looking at Kubernetes cluster info. So anyhow, it's like there's a very abstract way of looking at things, but there's also a very specific way of looking at things, and we have both.
Yes. I could explain more about our unified data model. I assume we could actually talk a lot more about that, but maybe we defer that just to be
different model, different video.
Exactly. So let's try to focus on, and I was on the talking about the EC2 instance here.
Yeah.
And maybe just to give you an outlook about the upcoming 3.0 version. So we are looking at the documentation for the current version here, which is the EC2 instance, and I have here like I have here the updated documentation for the upcoming 3.0 version, and you see that's even so tiny that I need to open it in a separate tab here just to show you the information that we gather for every EC2 instance. So like you see here, nothing has changed here. Like there's still a resource, it's still an instance, AWS resource, but here are all the properties that we collect for every EC2 instance. And like the goal for 3.0 was to say like we collect all the information that AWS provides for an EC2 instance, by also making sure that we still adhere to the API that we had before, so like as I said earlier, which are available in the resource and the instance model. But yeah, and you not only see here like one box for EC2 instance, but you also see boxes down here. So let me.
Matthias, quick question. What we're looking at, all the new light items, those are all properties, right? Like these are different properties for the EC2 instance.
Yes. So right. Like everything, single line here is a property, like instance monitoring, for example, instance platform, life cycle, capacity reservation. Like every line is one property of one specific kind. So you know if you want to filter, for example, for EC2 instance licenses, then you know it's an array of string as defined here by that definition. So you know what to expect in the result or what to use if you want to search for a license. Does this make sense?
That makes a lot of sense.
Cool. And sometimes like you see there's something like string or Boolean or double, like that is like simple types, as we call them, simple kinds. And then there's sometimes something like AWS EC2 instance block device mapping, which is an array here. And that means that we have a property which is called instance block device mappings, which is an array of that type. And this is again a more complex type that we are looking at. And that is what we see here, which this EC2 instance is pointing to. So here's this definition of that nested property. And you see that every EC2 instance block device mapping is again its own like definition of how the data looks like. And in this case, there's a device name, which is a string, and then there's another definition, which is nested in this case. If it is an EBS block device mapping, then you can expect this kind of data, which is described down here. And you see that in AWS EC2 EBS instance block device has like an attach time, a delete on termination, a status, and so on. So like the properties itself, I don't want to go into the details. I just want to show like the structure and how to read it, how to get to the information that is available here. So and as I said, maybe just trying to repeat, like you're seeing a set of properties which have a name and a type, and this type is either a simple type like Boolean string, double, int, etc., or it's a complex It's a complex kind, which means it is a nested property. It's a nested property, and that one is defined in one of the boxes here below. And that can be like arbitrary deep. Usually it's not, but you sometimes see like definitions, depending on how AWS describes the resources. So most of the structure that you see here is not something that is invented by Resoto. It's something that is just provided by AWS as is.
Right. And the hard work we do is we looking at that, and that's how we document it here in this data model.
Exactly.
Okay. But I think the key insight is if I want to have a very specific type of information that's at the very bottom of your nested chain there, I don't know, pick an example. You had one. Well, I guess it doesn't matter. I can, because it's nested, I have to go all the way through there, but I can do that because we did the hard work of mapping the connections.
Yes.
When?
You were actually breaking up. I didn't hear the full sentence, but
I'm so glad the internet connection in our own office is keeping us apart.
Great. So that is one thing I wanted to show. And let me just quickly jump to our Risotto shell, where you can actually get the same kind of information. So there's this kinds command, which you can use to look up how a specific kind looks like. And like I did this before, that's why it's already pre-filled. And you actually see like the information that we have for EC2 instance. It's the name, AWS EC2 instance, and then you have the properties here, which are exactly the same as we've seen before in the image. There are all the properties with the specific kinds, like the nested kinds, something like AWS EC2 group identifier is not shown here. You would need to ask specifically, like, again, to describe this. Let me just do that. So I can also ask, like, how does this kind look like, and then I would get the same information out of that. But you basically can describe how a resource looks like by using this. By using this command. And what's also interesting, you not only see the base kinds, as we've seen on the image, like in EC2 instance is an instance, is an AWS resource, is a resource. We also see how this resource might be connected in the graph that we maintain. So here you see all the possible predecessors and successors of an EC2 instance node. And I'm jumping back to my image here because I have a visual representation of that, which is, let me just show you here, which is also available in the documentation for every resource type that we have. We not only show you how the data model looks like, but also how this resource is connected in terms of predecessors and successors. And just jumping back here.
Right.
So you see like the AWS EC2 instances here right in the middle.
Yeah.
And you go ahead. You want to ask a question? Sorry, I'm too fast.
No, I think you're just about to explain what I was going to ask, but go on, and then I'll ask again.
Okay, so what we see here is, and we were just asking for the information about an AWS EC2 instance, and this image basically shows all the predecessors and all the successors of this of an AWS EC2 instance. So Like if the EC2 instance is behind an ELB or an ALB target group, or if it is part of an autoscaling group, all of those resources would point to an EC2 instance, and the EC2 instance itself might be like attached to a network interface, have a CloudWatch alarm, have an elastic IP, or uses an EC2 key pair. Like all of this information are available to Risotto. That does not mean that your EC2 instance need a relationship to an ELB or an ALB or network interface. It is more like if there is a connection between, like if there is an EC2 instance which has a CloudWatch alarm, then you can expect exactly this relationship in the graph. So it just shows you like a possible edge definition.
This is let's say, the theoretical model. This is what the world could possibly look like, but It doesn't necessarily mean that there's a resource for every single one of these boxes in the real world deployment, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's assume I only have, I see, I'm just going to pick the elastic IP address at the bottom. Let's just assume I have only that. That piece of information. What I could do with Risotto now is like, I could search for this IP address, just type it in, search for it. And then I could ask, well, show me all the predecessors, right?
Exactly.
And then actually, I don't care about all predecessors. I just care about the actual EC2 instances. So I could write that as a search, correct? And traverse the graph and find that specific EC2 instance, if it's more than one, maybe.
What was that? EC2 elastic IP. So yeah, you're absolutely right. So you were saying something like we could query for EC2 elastic IPs. That is what the search would look like. And then we could traverse the graph inbound. And we just want to go exactly one step here, because you see if we want to reach the EC2 instances, we search for EC2 elastic IPs, walk the graph inbound, which is expressed by this arrow here, and then we can filter the result for EC2 instances. And let me just limit it to one. But yeah, that's basically, so we found an elastic IP, we walked the graph inbound and searched for the relation between the elastic IP and EC2 instance, and we print the EC2 instance here. So that is what you can do very easily, and the kind of traversals you need to do, like this, what I just did here with this arrow to the left, which means walk the graph inbound from the instance that you have found. Like you can read this this definition of the possible graph and do exactly this kind of search and traversal that you need.
Awesome. Getting into our search syntax is probably best kept for another video, but I think we just learned a lot, right? We went from, hey, this is the concept of a resource and properties, and here's what it looks like in the graph, and nested properties, and how this then all wraps up in a search syntax, and how we can use the graph to find pretty much any resource based on its properties and dependencies. Cool. Yes. All right. We'll do one more video next time about our search syntax. Awesome, Matthias. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Lars.